Scientists just discovered something inside a purple vegetable that stopped tumor blood vessel growth in its tracks. Not slowed it, stopped it. The same signal that tumors use to recruit their own private blood supply. The signal that turns a microscopic cluster of rogue cells into a growing, spreading cancer was shut down by a pigment in a potato. And here is what makes this even more remarkable. That same pigment in the same food lowered blood pressure in people already on blood pressure medication, dropped liver enzymes in 8 weeks, blunted the post-meal glucose and insulin spikes that damage your artery walls over decades, and improved artery function through a nitric oxide mechanism, so precisely confirmed that researchers were able to switch the benefit on and off by blocking a single pathway. One food, doing all of that, and most people have never heard of it, or if they have, they walk right past it at the grocery store because they do not know what they are looking at. It is the purple sweet potato, and the science inside it is some of the most compelling vascular biology in nutritional research right now. I am Dr. Thomas, and if this kind of deep dive is useful to you, hit like and subscribe. Every week I break down the science of angiogenesis so you can turn knowledge into prevention. Now, before we get into the science, let me give you some context, because this story goes back a lot further than most people realize. On a small chain of islands in the East China Sea, a population became famous for something that scientists still cannot fully explain. The people of Okinawa had some of the longest life expectancies ever recorded, the highest concentration of centenarians on the planet, people living past 100 with their minds and bodies largely intact. And for centuries, the anchor of their diet was not a superfood supplement, not an exotic herb, not a pharmaceutical intervention. It was the purple sweet potato. They called it beni emo, deep violet flesh. Stains your fingers when you cut it. They ate it every single day. Now, no single vegetable explains Okinawan longevity, but inside that purple flesh is a family of pigments called anthocyanins. And when researchers finally started analyzing what those pigments actually do inside the body, what they found connects directly to one of the most fundamental processes in human biology: angiogenesis, the growth and maintenance of blood vessels, the same process that drives cancer, the same process that drives heart disease, the same process that determines whether your tissues stay alive and healthy or begin to fail. Now, here is what makes purple sweet potato different from every other anthocyanin-rich food you have probably heard about. The anthocyanins in purple sweet potato are acylated. That means they carry extra chemical groups bolted onto their sugar structure, and that single structural difference makes them dramatically more stable than the anthocyanins in blueberries, red cabbage, or black rice, more resistant to heat, more resistant to light, more resistant to pH swings. It is the reason purple sweet potato survives steaming and baking with its color and its biological activity largely intact, while a blueberry turns gray when you cook it and loses most of its benefit. In one analysis of purple sweet potato tubers, all 9 anthocyanins identified were acylated, with pianidine derivatives dominating in the roots. This is not just a different color, it is a fundamentally more stable and potentially more bioavailable molecule. And what those molecules do to your blood vessels is what the rest of this video is about. Now let me explain the biology, because once you understand this, everything else makes sense. The master signal for blood vessel growth in your body is a molecule called VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor. We talk about VEGF constantly on this channel because it shows up in every major disease we cover: cancer, heart disease, stroke, diabetes. In healthy tissue, VEGF is tightly regulated. It switches on when tissue needs more blood supply. It switches off when the job is done. But tumors hijack this system. A tumor in its earliest stages is just a tiny cluster of rogue cells. It cannot grow beyond the size of a pinhead on its own because without a blood supply, it cannot get the oxygen and nutrients it needs. So it does something remarkable. It fires VEGF like a distress flare into the surrounding tissue. Nearby, blood vessels respond by sprouting new branches that grow directly toward the tumor. Once those vessels arrive, the tumor has its own private supply line. Now it can grow. Now it can spread. And check this out. Researchers took the individual anthocyanidins found in purple and other deeply pigmented foods into the lab and asked a simple question. Can these molecules block this process? The answer was yes, and they mapped out exactly how mechanism 1, jamming the receptor. Anthocyanidins physically blocked VEGF from trivial, its receptor on endothelial cells. With the receptor silenced, downstream signaling stopped. Endothelial cells stopped migrating. They failed to organize into the capillary-like tubes that feed a tumor. In living mice, this suppressed growth factor-driven vessel formation entirely. Mechanism 2. Turning down the oxygen alarm upstream of VEGF is a sensor called HIF-1 alpha. When tissue runs low on oxygen, HIF-1 alpha accumulates and switches on VEGF. It is the distress signal that calls in new blood vessels. Anthocyanidins block the buildup of HIF-1 alpha protein and cut VEGF production at both the gene and protein level by shutting down multiple signaling pathways simultaneously. No HIF-1 alpha, no VEGF, mechanism 3. Freezing the cell cycle. Endothelial cells have to divide to build a vessel. Anthocyanidins arrested them in the resting phase by restoring a brake protein called P27 and preventing VEGF pushing cells into active division. The construction crew shows up but cannot start building. Now, purple sweet potato's own pigments have their own specific track record in cancer research, and this is where it gets really important. Purple sweet potato anthocyanin reduced bladder cancer cell viability in a dose-dependent manner, triggered programmed cell death, and suppressed the PI3K ACT signaling pathway that several modern cancer drugs specifically target. An anthocyanin-enriched purple sweet potato clone called P40 arrested human colon cancer cells so they could not divide, and when fed to mice, it significantly reduced chemically induced precancerous lesions in the colon, with decreased cell proliferation and increased programmed cell death throughout the tissue. Extracts from purple sweet potato inhibited breast, gastric, and colon cancer cell lines while sparing normal cells. The cancer cells died, the healthy cells did not, and in mice bred to develop severe atherosclerosis, anthocyanins from the Ayamurasaki cultivar cut plaque area roughly in half and lowered the vessel inflammation marker SVCAM1 without changing cholesterol at all. The plaque shrank, the inflammation dropped through a direct vascular mechanism, completely independent of cholesterol levels. Now let me bring this back to Okinawa for a moment, because here is what is striking about that population. The Okinawans were eating beni imo every single day, not occasionally, not as a supplement, as a staple, the primary source of calories in their diet. And the anthocyanins in that potato are more heat-stable than virtually any other anthocyanin-rich food on the planet. Which means every time they cooked it, they were getting a full dose of those pigments consistently for decades. And those centenarians, with their extraordinary cardiovascular health and longevity, were eating the most biologically active version of these compounds available in the entire plant kingdom. That is not a coincidence. Now let me tell you about the human trials, because this is where the story moves from petri dishes to real people, and the results are more impressive than most people realize. Trial 1. 40 healthy adults with borderline elevated liver enzymes were randomly assigned to drink either an anthocyanin-rich purple sweet potato beverage containing 177 milligrams of anthocyanins, or a nearly anthocyanin-free placebo for 8 weeks. Double-blind. By day 43, the purple sweet potato group had significantly lower liver enzyme levels than placebo. Direct evidence that this specific food at a realistic dose moves measurable biomarkers in real humans. Trial 2, and this one genuinely surprised me. 18 hypertensive adults, the majority already on blood pressure medication, Ate 6 to 8 small microwave purple potatoes twice daily for 4 weeks. Diastolic blood pressure fell about 4 millimeters of mercury. Systolic about 5. In people already on blood pressure drugs, no weight gain, no change in glucose or lipids, just measurably lower blood pressure from eating purple potatoes. Think about what that means. These were patients whose doctors had already decided they needed medication to control their blood pressure. And on top of that medication, eating a purple vegetable dropped their numbers further. Trial 317. Healthy men consumed a purple potato extract containing 152 milligrams of acylated anthocyanins, the same acylated type found in purple sweet potato alongside a meal. The extract significantly lowered the post-meal glucose and insulin curves, and blunting those metabolic spikes matters directly for your arteries because repeated glucose surges are one of the primary mechanisms that damage endothelium over decades. Trial 450. Healthy men ate a high polyphenol diet built around purple sweet potato leaves for 7 days and then exercised intensely. Compared to the low polyphenol control period, the leaf diet raised plasma antioxidant capacity and significantly reduced 2 markers of oxidative damage, plus the inflammatory cytokine IL-6. Exercise-induced oxidative damage reduced by eating purple sweet potato leaves. Now let me zoom out to the broader anthocyanin human evidence, because this is where the data becomes genuinely compelling. The gold standard test of how well your arteries function is called flow-mediated dilation. An ultrasound measures how much your brachial artery widens after a brief cuff occlusion. It is essentially a report card on your endothelium's ability to make nitric oxide, the molecule that relaxes vessels, keeps platelets from clumping, and keeps inflammatory cells from sticking to your vessel walls. In a randomized controlled trial, 150 people with high cholesterol received 320 milligrams a day of purified baryanthinins, or placebo, for 12 weeks. Flow-mediated dilation improved by 28% in the anthocyanin group versus 2% in placebo. 28% plasma nitric oxide levels rose in parallel, and then the investigators did something that made this finding airtight. They repeated the experiment while blocking the nitric oxide pathway pharmacologically. The benefit disappeared entirely. That is about as close as human research gets to proving a mechanism. Anthocyanins were working through nitric oxide, not through some other pathway, not through weight loss, not through cholesterol reduction, through nitric oxide directly in the artery wall. And in August 2026, a systematic review and meta-analysis pooled 18 prospective cohorts across 27 publications plus 65 randomized controlled trials. The findings were striking, comparing highest to lowest habitual anthocyanin intake, 26% lower cardiovascular disease incidence, 18% lower heart attack risk, 11% lower type 2 diabetes risk, 9% lower cardiovascular mortality, 8% lower hypertension risk. From the randomized trials, flow-mediated dilation improved by 1.41 percentage points with chronic intake. And in the subgroup analysis, cyanidin, one of the 2 main anthocyanidins in purple sweet potato, specifically drove those improvements. These benefits appeared at intakes as low as 50 milligrams per day, a completely achievable amount from diet alone. Now here is the paradox that is one of the most fascinating things in all of this research, and I want you to pay attention to this, because it is the same thing we found with epicatechin in the dark chocolate video. If anthocyanins suppress blood vessel growth, why do wounds heal better when anthocyanins are present? Should they not make wounds worse by blocking the blood vessel formation needed for tissue repair? They do not. And what researchers found when they looked at wound tissue explains everything. In animal wound studies, anthocyanins accelerated healing. When they looked at the tissue, they found VEGF going up, new capillary markers going up, and the natural brakes on angiogenesis going down. And in a single study, anthocyanin simultaneously stimulated VEGF production in the repair cells of a wound while suppressing VEGF and reactive oxygen species in inflamed endothelial cells. The same molecules, opposite directions, depending on what they find when they get there. And this was confirmed in people. A randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial in 60 volunteers with oral wounds compared an anthocyanin preparation against a steroid gel and placebo. The anthocyanin group closed wounds faster, reduced pain, and improved quality of life, more than the alternatives, more than the steroid. So, what is actually happening? Anthocyanins do not simply turn angiogenesis on or off. They act like a thermostat, pushing the system back toward balance, where signaling is pathologically overdriven. A tumor, an inflamed plaque, they pull it down. Where tissue is trying to repair itself and is being blocked by oxidative stress and inflammation, they clear the obstruction and let normal repair proceed. This is the same context-dependent behavior we found with epicotectin in dark chocolate, and it is one of the most important things to understand about dietary polyphenols generally. It is something that purely pharmaceutical drugs, which tend to be blunt instruments targeting a single pathway, often cannot replicate. Now, I need to be honest with you about where the science actually stands, because no single food is a magic bullet, and I would rather give you an accurate picture than an exciting one. The dramatic angiogenic results come from cell culture and animal models, sometimes using extract concentrations well above what circulates in human blood. A review comparing preclinical and clinical anthocyanin studies in colorectal and breast cancer found that while nearly every animal study pointed toward cancer prevention, the human studies have not yet fully reproduced that. Likely because the doses tested in people were far lower than animal equivalent doses. The cancer prevention chapter is still being written. The vascular chapter has significantly stronger human evidence, and the purple sweet potato trials specifically are small: 40 people, 18 people, 17 people, 15 people. Small studies are how good research starts, but they are a beginning rather than a conclusion. The reasonable takeaway is a clear one. Purple sweet potato is a nourishing food with extraordinary biology, best thought of as one powerful addition among many, alongside cancer screening, blood pressure management, exercise, and any treatment your physician has recommended. Now, let me tell you something about how these molecules travel through your body that most people never hear about, and it genuinely surprised me when I first read it. When researchers gave volunteers labeled cyanidin and tracked every atom through the body, relative bioavailability came out at about 12%. At first glance, that sounds discouraging, but the reason is not that anthocyanins go unabsorbed. It is that they are transformed. Much of what reaches your bloodstream is not the pigment itself. It is its breakdown products, phenolic acids, hippuric acid, protocatechoic acid. Your gut bacteria do the transforming. People who have had their colon removed show substantially lower levels of these compounds, and in human trials, it was these metabolites, not the parent anthocyanins, that best predicted improved artery function. The compound you eat may not be the compound that does the work. That is not a strike against purple sweet potato. It just means the story is a layer deeper than it first appears, and it means your gut microbiome directly influences how much benefit you get from this food. Regularly eating fermented foods, yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, supports the bacterial diversity that makes this conversion more efficient. The gut health connection to purple sweet potato runs deeper than most people realize. Now, preparation matters, and this is where purple sweet potato differs from almost every other food we have covered on this channel. With blueberries, you want to eat them raw, frozen to preserve anthocyanins. With tomatoes, you want to cook them with olive oil to increase lycopene absorption. Purple sweet potato sits in a unique position because its acylated anthocyanins are far more heat stable than any other common anthocyanin-rich food. A comprehensive study comparing 7 cooking methods found that steaming and microwaving retained the most beneficial compounds, while stir-frying retained the least, with anthocyanin losses of up to 83%. Baking, frying, and air frying caused moderate losses of 11 to 45%. And a 2023 study found that sous vide cooking, sealing the sweet potato in a bag, and cooking it in a temperature-controlled water bath best preserved anthocyanins and yielded the highest total phenolic content and antioxidant activity. And here is a tip most people miss. Keep the skin on. Studies show that cooking with the peel intact retains significantly more bioactive compounds and antioxidant activity. So the practical recommendation is simple: steam, microwave, or sous. Vide your purple sweet potatoes with the skin on. That is it. Now let us look at the full picture. The color of a food is not decoration, it is chemistry. That violet pigment exists because the plant built it, and when you eat it, it enters a conversation with the cells lining 60,000 miles of your own blood vessels. In the laboratory, the acid. Anthocyanins in purple sweet potato interfere with the VEGF and H1 alpha machinery that tumors and diseased arteries depend on. They jam the receptor. They silence the oxygen alarm. They freeze the cell cycle of endothelial cells, trying to build tumor blood vessels. In human trials, purple sweet potato beverage lowered liver enzymes in 8 weeks. Purple potatoes lowered blood pressure in people already on medication. Acylated anthocyanin extract blunted post-meal glucose and insulin spikes. Purple sweet potato leaves reduced exercise, induced oxidative damage and inflammation. And in the broader anthocyanin literature, 150 people showed 28% improvement in arterial function through a nitric oxide mechanism. Researchers confirmed by blocking it. 65 randomized trials showed better endothelial function, and population data across millions of people showed 20.6% lower cardiovascular disease incidence in those with the highest anthocyanin intake. The Okinawans did not know any of this. They just ate the purple root because it grew well, and it fed them. And for century after century, generation after generation, their blood vessels apparently thanked them for it. Steam it, keep the skin on, eat it regularly, and understand that the color you are looking at is not just a pretty vegetable. It is one of the most biologically active pigments in the human food supply, talking directly to your blood vessels every time you eat it. I am Dr. Thomas. If this helped you understand purple sweet potato in a deeper way, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs it. And if you want me to cover the best ways to incorporate purple sweet potato into your weekly diet, or go deeper on how anthocyanins interact with the gut microbiome, leave a comment below, and I will cover that next.